Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Business and Utility Subcommittee. Today is Wednesday, February the 24th, 2021. It is 3:30 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, if you could take the roll, please.
Representatives Alexander, Calfee, Hazelwood, Hodges, Holsclaw, Johnson, Manis, Thompson, Vaughn, Zachary, Chairman Boyd.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get started today, is there anyone that has any personal orders? If not, we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a calendar today, but before we get started, I'd like to do just a couple of housekeeping things, and we will dispense with introductions because I think we all met each other the other day in full committee. I will refer you to the set of rules that were laid out by Chairman Vaughn for full committee. All of them will apply to the subcommittee as well. A few things, particularly this committee, I would remind anyone that if you have someone that you want to testify or speak on a bill, that they will need to be approved by me at least 24 hours in advance, and there will be a time limit of 5 minutes except for follow-up questions that may come. The amendment deadline for this subcommittee is Tuesdays at 10 a.m. I will remind everyone that we are all professional legislators here. We will have decorum. Would ask that you get recognized before you speak, and if you're asking a question to the sponsor of the bill, we don't want to get into little side conversations. We want to make sure that each one gets recognized before they speak. And I will tell anyone that has a bill before this committee, I would encourage you to get your motion and your second lined up ahead of time. It is not certain that you will get that. So just want to remind you of that, and want to do a quick introduction to a few of the staff with this committee, and I'll start off with our research analyst, Ben Voitis. Right here, thank you, Ben. And Attorney Jamie Shanks will normally be here today. We have Mr. Matt King right here to my left, and then my legislative assistant, also functioning as the clerk, is Miss Sarah Noel. All right, we'll go ahead and get started today. Item number 5 has been rolled 1 week, so let's go ahead and get started. First up, item number 1, House Bill 91 by Leader Lamberth, and it's being ran by Representative Hurt. Representative Hurt, you're recognized. We have a motion. We have a second. We're properly on the bill. Representative Hurt, you recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I wanted to state that I missed serving on this committee, subcommittee and corresponding full committee. I'm not on it, but I enjoyed it the last couple of years. House Bill 91, this bill aligns a drinking water revolving loan terms with improvements made at the federal level by authorizing an eligible entity to elect up to a 30-year loan term, increased from 20 years under current law, and up to 40-year loan term for those communities that fit the definition of a disadvantaged community under the law, which is increased from a 30-year term under current law. These loans are used for the planning, design, and construction of drinking water infrastructure projects.
Thank you, sponsor, for that explanation. Do we have any questions for the sponsor on the bill?
Question on the bill.
If the question has been called, if there's no objection, we're voting on House Bill 91. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Bill passes. It's on the way to full committee.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Chairman.
sponsor.
Committee.
Next up, item number 2, House Bill 106 by Leader Lamberth. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized on the bill. We have a motion. We have a second. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is a very simple bill, and I never would have dreamed it was necessary, but private corporations need our permission to be able to have virtual meetings of their shareholders. It is included in the statute that they can't do that, even if in their charter, even if they chose to do so. This bill will allow them to do that. So if a corporation chooses to, in conjunction with their shareholders, then they could have virtual meetings if this bill were to come along. They're not allowed to do now. I stand ready for questions. Sorry.
Thank you for that explanation, sponsor. The question's been called for. Is there any objection to the question? If not, we're voting on House Bill 106. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Ayes have it. Bill's on its way to full committee. Thank you, sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the committee. Best committee I've been in all day.
Next up, item number 3, House Bill 252 by Chairman Hazelwood. Chairman Hazelwood, you are recognized at your seat. We have a motion. We have a second on the bill. Chairman Hazelwood, you're recognized on House Bill 252.
Thank you, Chairman. This bill may look familiar to those of you who were on this committee last year because it did pass through this committee, the full committee, and the House, but our colleagues across the way did not see fit to complete all their tasks, and it wasn't passed in the Senate, so we're back here again. But the bottom line is this is just a safety bill. It's to protect electric workers. And it just requires that any new equipment that's capable of generating electricity, that's interconnected to a local electric utility system, that it has to be installed using Underwriters Laboratory components. It has to be installed according to the National Electric Safety Code. The utility has to be notified of the installation and are allowed to be, they don't have to be, but they have to have the opportunity to be present for testing. And it requires that the installation of the equipment, that there be a disconnect point so that those line workers working on the grid in case of restoration of power or whatever, that they would be able to disconnect this from the grid to prevent any kind of accidents. And it removes liability from the local utility for damages that are caused by customer-owned equipment that doesn't comply with these requirements. So with that explanation, Mr. Chairman, I stand ready for questions.
Are there any questions for the sponsor? Chairman Hazelwood, I will say this is a good piece of legislation. It is very important. I liked it last year when it came through, and I'm glad you brought it back again this year. So if there's no questions for the sponsor, we are voting on House Bill 252. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The bill's moving to full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, fellow committee members.
Next up, item number 4, House Bill 9 by Representative Reedy. Representative Reedy, you're recognized on House Bill 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this was
We have a motion. We have a second. Representative Reedy, you're recognized on your bill.
and just like Chair Lady Hazelwood's bill, this was a casualty of COVID last year too. It made its way all the way to the House floor. I do see we have a couple new members. A quick explanation of that is on the Locksmith Licensing Act of 2006, this bill will repeal that law. And for many reasons, and I guess when we talked about it initially last year, we took about 35 minutes to discuss it. Certainly with that, Chairman, you've got a good friend that's a locksmith, as well as Chairman Holtzclaw that is in total support of this bill. What are your questions?
Are there any questions for
Thompson.
Representative Thompson? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have some concerns about the bill, and maybe this was some of the discussion last year.
Yes, sir.
But part of the bill repeals, as you said, Chapter 6211-102, which is the Locksmith Licensing Act. And just wanted to read, real briefly, the purpose of that chapter while it was there in the first place. It says it's to provide uniform procedures and qualifications throughout the state for licensing and regulation of locksmiths to protect the public of the state by prohibiting the unauthorized use of lock-picking, safe opening, and car opening tools by making it illegal for persons convicted of certain crimes to obtain or possess such tools, and to protect the safety and security of persons and property by assuring that individuals and companies offering locksmith services to the general public are competent in locksmithing services and are trained in applicable laws and regulations such as the Americans with Disabilities Act, building codes, and life safety codes. So would passing this law mean that, for instance, there are no legal standards for the practice of locksmithing? And also, would it also allow consideration of a former felon convicted of theft or burglary to be potentially hired as a locksmith? Because this act prevents those things right now.
Representative Reedy, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And totally, that is the fact. So I was here lobbying to make this bill happen, and it just barely passed to begin with. And that's what we as professional locksmiths thought. We need to get this in place to protect the public. So I've been a locksmith for 17 years. Do we protect the public? And the answer is no. Now keep in mind, there's actually only 13 states that license locksmith. And the reason I say 13 and not 14, what we saw in Nevada was Las Vegas. So the state just gave to Las Vegas, said, well, you could set the law for a locksmith in Las Vegas. Well, the elected officials in Las Vegas said, okay, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to say, Representative Reedy, not only do you have to be a locksmith, you have to have a shop. You have to have a dozen employees, put everything in place. And what we found is it was a way to prevent other locksmiths from coming to town that were maybe just mobile. Now, keep in mind also, when ALOA, the American Locksmith Organization of America, they were really pushing this big time for all states. Then what they found out, the pushback from all the states and fellow locksmiths were saying, you're going to hurt our trade. And that's exactly what we had done. So Tennessee, so when I started the process, because when I came here, I wanted to make Tennessee have the best locksmith law in the country. And so I called the lawyer at ALOA and I said, who's got the best locksmith law? They said, Tennessee. I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have the best law. We've got the highest licensing fee, the most onerous law in the land, from the education. I did share some information a couple weeks ago, so maybe you have it, maybe you don't have it. And it was information that was given to me. And we found out that, I guess with, being as I'm to that, the work that we do, you can go to Ace Hardware and get the high security key for your vehicle. You can go to your automotive repair shop and they can program chip keys for your cars. Do they have to be licensed? No, they don't. Okay, here's how we work in the industry. I license my business, then I have to have myself licensed, and then if you work for me, I have to have you licensed. Now, I could have you as a fully licensed locksmith, or I could have everybody on this committee to be apprentices. Here's the difference. And I asked the department, I said, what is an apprentice? Well, you throw the keys to the van and a cell phone to them and say, go do the job. If you get stuck, call me. I'll walk you through it. So, and not only that, you can be an apprentice for the rest of your life. So what we find out is a lot of locksmith companies, to protect their territory, they're not fully licensing their locksmiths, they're just keeping them on as apprentices. Now let me share the numbers with you on that. So here are the active numbers, and I'm going to give you 3 sets of numbers, and it's one's the locksmith, one is the apprentice, and then the third would be the companies. So in 2016, when I got here as a legislator, there was 377 locksmiths, licensed locksmiths in the state. There were 295 apprentices and 253 companies. The conversation went on, and of course, for 5 years, I was the president of Middle Tennessee Locksmith Association, visiting with the other locksmith associations across the state, and we kept coming. How do we get teeth in the law? We were finding out that there was no law enforcement for this. Talking about the professional tools that we use for opening safes, automobiles, or businesses, guess where you can find those? You know, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, in the pilot truck stops, opening tools for vehicles. And I had a member say, well, what is the best lock picking set that you use, and can I get one from you? And I said, no, because of the state law, you have to be licensed before I can sell it to you. Now, in my shop, because none of my children or my wife is licensed, per the law, if they are anywhere near key-making equipment or the computer, they have to be licensed either as a fully licensed locksmith or an apprentice. And that's always been a sticking point that, you know, if they're just in there part-time or just trying to help dear old dad out, that becomes a challenge. Let's go back to the numbers. So 2016, I gave you the numbers. 2020, last year, there were 345 locksmiths. So we lost a few. There was 511 apprentices, and then we lost the locksmith companies. There was only 236. So what I'm finding out, it was a lot of the older locksmiths that I become friends with, they either have died or retired, and nobody's replacing them because of the onerous law requiring all of the education and money to get them licensed. Then in 2021, what you're going to see on the fiscal note, we are now at 299 locksmiths compared to that 377 on 2016. and we're at 515, so we've gained a few apprentices just this last year, but now we're down to 216 companies. So from this year to last year, we lost 20 companies. And there is my challenge, showing the decline, showing the lack of enforcement. There's no reciprocation. I think it is only Alabama that has the locksmith law that adjoins Tennessee, and it's quite a self-regulating organization for the whole state. But not, I guess it was a few years ago, the Commerce and Insurance kind of did a sting operation down in Chattanooga. What they found out, there was a locksmith company at Atlanta coming to Chattanooga to do work. Why? Because we didn't have enough folks down there as licensed locksmiths to do the jobs, all right? So they set the operation up, caught them in the state, operating without a license, arrested them, asked for the local authorities to come finish off the job with the arrest. They said, you arrest them, you take care of them, we've had enough. So across the state, the sheriff department, police departments are saying, we're not enforcing the law. We got drug felons, rapists, murderers. We don't have time to handle this case. Now, per Tennessee law, we're supposed to be self-sufficient. In other words, locksmiths need to be able to stand alone. We don't. We can't. There's not. I gave you the numbers. There's not enough. We fall under the protective, professional protective services. It's your bodyguard, security people, all of that. They really carry the water for us. So if we fall short, in my opinion, we've become a burden to the state because there's no enforcement. Matter of fact, Representative Madison, in the Knoxville area, I actually made a phone call to Chairman Ramsey, and he gave me a name of a locksmith in Maryville. He said, I actually have a second locksmith shop in Knoxville. And I said, how's it working? And he says, well, I've got competition, unlicensed competition. He said, I can name you a dozen folks out here that's doing locksmith work that is my competition, but I'm the only one, the only one that is licensed. Same thing in my district is Clarksville. There's a half dozen. The guys throw a fit because there's unlicensed, unregulated, and it's like, why do we have a law that we're not going to enforce, that we lose business to because the commercial operators go to Home Depot, Lowe's, get your home locks rekeyed or pick up new locks. So we've got so many people doing the job. Or you can go online on eBay, buy a repin kit, watch a YouTube video, rekey your own business or your home. And so for years, I've been at this for 6 years now, trying to make it better. And then it was last year with the conversation from all of the locksmith associations. They said, let's just get rid of it. And I said, okay, here we go. Mr. Chairman.
Representative Thompson, you're recognized.
Thank you very much for all the information. I think you know something about your profession.
Yeah, thank you.
Still, the only concern I have is that, and I could see getting rid of the licensing aspect of this, and probably the majority of this law, but just chopping the whole thing out. You have a profession that can cause a lot of damage to a lot of people, and it seems like there needs to be something in here, some standards, and just chopping it all out goes a little bit too far.
Representative Reedy, you recognize.
Yeah, and you're certainly right, and that's the conversation that me and my professional locksmith friends are willing to have. Outside of this, they said, we just need to hit the reset button. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that let's set the locksmith license aside. I do have a business license for Houston County, so I have that. I've always been fully insured. Keep in mind, you have to have a certificate of insurance, and I've done federal and state work, and before they let me on the property, they want to see that certificate of insurance, or I don't have the job. So there's things already set into place. Now here's the problem, and it reflects on me 17 years ago. There's that 30-something-year-old person that is trying to make ends meet. They got a couple kids getting ready to go to college or in college, and then they look at this profession, and of course we met with Senator Bell and I at the time when I was newly elected. We had NFIB, the Beacon Center, and AFP in the office, as well as some of the big locksmith companies, especially out of the Memphis area, and said, what do we need to do? I mean, what should the standards be? But after we found out what it's required for you to become licensed and then license your business and the fees and all of that, it was a lot of folks saying, forget this, I'll go wash windows, I'll go paint houses. I mean, something that doesn't require a license. So keep in mind, there's a handful of states that have a license, and really, some of it's just a registration to come in and say, okay, we recognize you're in town. But yes, I collect sales tax, I get it to the state. I treat it as a sincere business, but then how many others are avoiding all of that and calling it something else, still doing the locksmith work? I kind of think that we could end up getting them as back with the business license and put them in law and order. Very much like Alabama is self-regulating because of the number of locksmiths, and it's just one huge organization, the Alabama Locksmith Association. And I really think that's what we need to do. We've got three. We've got East, West, and Middle Tennessee Locksmith Association. Then we have TOOLS, Tennessee Organization of Locksmiths, and we're all at wits' end on how to fix this law. And that's the general consensus. Matter of fact, it was the lobbyist quit a few years ago and said, I just give up. She wouldn't know how to fix it either because we're all over the place trying to figure out how to do it.
Members, are there any additional questions for the sponsor? Representative Thompson, you are recognized.
This will be real quick. No, I understand exactly what you're saying and everything. The only thing especially after last week, I'm a little shy of self-regulation after what happened in Texas. So I'll probably vote no today. I'm not 100% against this, but I do have some concerns. I just can't get over those concerns about the.
Question's been called. Is there any objection to the question? If not, we're voting on House Bill 9. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
No.
Ayes have it. Bill goes to full committee. Thank you, sponsor. Members, if there's nothing else on the agenda, then this meeting is adjourned.